Hey guys, today we're going to start out with a read aloud. This book is titled How Big is a Foot? What do you notice on the cover page of this book? You notice there's a person. What do you notice around that person? Some steps around them. Okay, how big is a foot? Yeah, we all have different size feet, don't we? My feet are bigger than your feet because you're not as tall as I am, right? Your dad or a male in your life, their foot's probably way bigger than my foot is. Okay, so we all have different size feet, but let's see if we can answer this question. How big is a foot today? All right, how big is a foot? Once upon a time, there lived a king and his wife, the queen. They were a happy couple, for they had everything in the world. However, when the queen's birthday came near, the king had a problem. What could he give someone who had everything? What do you think he could give someone who had everything? The king thought and he thought and he thought until suddenly he had an idea. He would give the queen a bed. The queen did not have a bed because at the time, beds had not been invented. So even someone who had everything did not have a bed. The king called his prime minister and asked him to please have a bed made. The prime minister called the chief carpenter and asked him to please have a bed made. The chief carpenter called the apprentice and told him to please make a bed. How big is a bed? Asked the apprentice, who didn't know because at the time nobody had ever seen a bed. How big is a bed? The carpenter asked the prime minister. A good question, said the prime minister, and he asked the king, how big is a bed? The king thought and he thought and he thought until suddenly he had an idea. The bed must be big enough to fit the queen. The king called the queen. He told her to put on her new pajamas and told her to lie on the floor. How do you think that they're going to find out how big the queen is? Let's see what happens to find out how big she is. The king took off his shoe and with his big feet walked carefully around the queen. He counted that the bed must be 3 foot wide and 6 feet long to be big enough to fit the queen, including the crown which the queen sometimes liked to wear to sleep. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The king said, "Thank you," to the queen, and told the prime minister, who told the chief carpenter, who told the apprentice the bed must be 3 foot wide and 6 feet long to be big enough to fit the queen, including the crown which she sometimes liked to wear to sleep. The apprentice said, "Thank you," and took off his shoes, and with his little feet he measured 3 feet wide and 6 feet long, and made a bed to fit the queen. Do you think the queen's going to fit in that bed? Why do you think that the queen will or will not fit in the bed? All right, let's see. Let's see what happens. When the king saw the bed, he thought it was beautiful. He could not wait for the queen's birthday. Instead, he called the queen at once and told her to put on her new pajamas. Then he brought out the bed and told the queen to try it. But the bed was much too small for the queen. The king was so angry that he immediately called the prime minister, who called the chief carpenter, who called the jailer, who threw the apprentice in jail. The apprentice was unhappy. Why was the bed too small for the queen? He thought and he thought and he thought until suddenly he had an idea. The bed was 3 king's feet wide and 6 king's feet long. And 6 king's feet long was naturally bigger than a bed that was 3 apprentice feet wide and 6 apprentice feet long. I can make a bed to fit the queen if I know the size of the king's foot, he cried. So was the apprentice foot the same size as the king's foot? It wasn't, was it? He explained this to the jailer, who explained it to the chief carpenter, who explained it to the prime minister, who explained it to the king, who was much too busy to go to the jail. Instead, the king took off one shoe and called a famous sculptor. The sculptor made an exact marble copy of the king's foot. This was sent to the jail. The apprentice took the marble copy of the king's foot, and with it he measured 3 feet wide and 6 feet long, and built a bed to fit the queen. Do you think the queen will fit in this bed? Why or why not? The bed was ready just in time for the queen's birthday. The king called the queen and told her to put on her new pajamas. Then he brought out the new bed and told the queen to try it. The queen got into bed and wonder if she's going to fit. The bed fit the queen perfectly, including the crown which she sometimes liked to wear to sleep. It was, without a doubt, the nicest gift that the queen had ever received. The king was very happy. He immediately called the apprentice from jail and made him a royal prince. He ordered a big parade, and all the people came out to cheer for the little apprentice prince. And forever after, anyone who wanted to measure anything used a copy of the king's foot. And when somebody said, "My bed is 6 foot long and 3 foot wide," everyone knew exactly how big it was. So when the apprentice used his feet to measure the bed, was it the same size as the king's feet? It wasn't, was it? So we have to have a unit of measure that is the same for everybody. So that when I say 6 foot long and 3 foot wide, you would know how long that was, right? So what that is called units. A unit is a part that is used to measure. So each part for one kind of unit is the same length. So like the king's foot. Okay, that was a unit. It was a part that was used to measure. And anybody that measured with the king's foot would be able to compare those units and then be the same. All right, let's go ahead now and let's look at our learning target. Our learning target says, I can measure the length of an object in inches and centimeters. So let's go ahead and start talking about this word measure. What does it mean to measure? Measure means to find the length, the height, and the weight by comparing it to an unknown unit. Okay? So we're going to measure something to find the length. Well, what is length? Length is the measurement that tells the distance from one part to another or how long something is. You've probably heard of a ruler before, haven't you? A ruler is a measuring stick that is marked in inches and centimeters. Okay? Let's look at that word, inches. Inches is a unit of length. Inches has 12 inches that equals 1 foot. A quarter is about 1 inch across. And we're going to look at this more in depth today on how to measure to find the length in inches. We'll talk about centimeters a little bit later, but today we're going to focus on inches, okay? We're in our Ready Math Journal on page 497. Ready Math Journal, page 497. All right, now that we're on page 497, let's go ahead and let's start by looking at the problem. So we have learned that we can find how long the objects are using different units. Okay, maybe last year you used the snap cubes to measure, and that was your unit that you used was the snap cubes. Maybe you've measured with yarn before, and that was your unit, okay? You can use things like a foot, like they did in our book. You can use things that you can find around you. But if we want it to be consistent throughout, we're going to have to use a unit that is consistent, like inches, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and read our problem. How long is this marker? How long is this marker? All right, go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to answer that question. How long is this marker? All right, let's look at a couple of different ways. So you probably used these inch tiles that are underneath. But an inch can also be found on a ruler, so maybe you chose to use a ruler. We're going to look at both of those ways now. All right, so here we have the marker from above. And when we're using the inch tiles, that is, it's the same as a ruler, but it's separate. So what we're going to do is we line that marker up at the beginning of our inch tile and lay our inch tiles down side by side, not overlapping, but side by side. And then we get to the end. You probably noticed back over here that there's a black line underneath that shows where the marker starts and where the marker ends to help you compare it on your inch tiles. All right, now let's go back and look. So now we can count how many inch tiles there are that shows us the length of the marker. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inch tiles. So that means that the marker is 6 inches long. Each inch tile is 1 inch. You might have chosen to use your ruler. When you're using a ruler, your ruler either starts with 0 or sometimes 0's not on there and it's just known that when it doesn't have a 0, you always start at the end. Here, this ruler does have a 0, so we match the end of the marker to 0. And then we find where the end of the marker was, which is 6. Okay? So here, the marker lines up with 6 on an inch ruler. So the marker is 6 inches long. So even we used inches, that was our unit, okay? Because the inch tile in this ruler between 0 and 1 is the same length. It is 1 inch. So then when we use both of those to measure the marker, we got the same measurement of 6 inches long. Now let's go and let's look at page 498. And let's answer that question. How long is the marker? How long was the marker, guys? 6. We have to be really sure when we're doing measurements that we put that unit behind it. We were measuring in inches. To write inches, we abbreviate that IN. Okay, you could write out the whole word inches, but when we abbreviate inches, we write it as IN. So how long was the marker? It was 6 inches. We can measure length with inches and with centimeters. Today we practice measuring in inches. This quarter is about 1 inch across. So it's talking about from the right side to the left side of a quarter. That is about 1 inch, just so that you have a real life example of what 1 inch would be. Now 1 centimeter is smaller than 1 inch. 1 centimeter is about the width or the length across of your pinky finger. Okay, so from one side of your fingernail to the other side, that is about 1 centimeter. So centimeters are smaller than inches. A centimeter is a unit of length, and 100 centimeters equals 1 meter. Okay? All right, now a ruler is a tool that is used to measure length. What units can you measure with this ruler? What are the units of measure that we can measure with this ruler? Rulers have 1 unit of measure on the top and 1 unit of measure on the bottom. And a lot of times, just like here, it'll tell you. So this ruler you can measure inches and you can measure centimeters, okay? On a ruler, there are 12 inches and there are 30 centimeters. It takes more centimeters than inches because remember, centimeters are smaller. All right, now let's reflect. Bruno says that it is more useful to measure a shoelace with a ruler than with paper clips. Explain why. Why is it more useful to measure with a ruler than with paper clips? Go ahead and pause the video and talk with someone about that question. All right, so think back to us in reading our book, How Much is a Foot? When the king measured with his foot, he got a different size than when the apprentice measured with his foot. So was that a useful measurement tool? Okay, so what about with paper clips? Are all paper clips the same size? No, paper clips are different sizes. So paper clips would not be a useful measurement. A ruler would be a more useful measurement because a ruler has units that are the same. If you measure in inches, it's going to be the same. If you measure in centimeters, right? Anybody can measure in inches and it should be the same. Anybody can measure in centimeters and the object should be the same. So the ruler is a more useful tool because it has inches and centimeters that are always the same size. Okay? So the ruler has inches and centimeters that are always the same size. All right, guys, I am so excited to be learning and practicing measurement with you. I hope that you enjoy this too. This is a very useful life skill that a lot of people use in their jobs or their everyday lives. Bye, guys.